All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming for this talk about JBoss Forge. We'll teach you how to get it done with your IDE, how to automate your development using JBoss Forge. My name is George Gastaldi. I am one of the JBoss Forge core developers, and here is Lincoln 3. He's the Forge project lead.
Hello.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us today. If there's one thing that I'm hoping we can let you guys take home today, it's that there are options for taking the mundane work out of programming, and we're going to show you hopefully how to do that. We'll start with going over your job because we know everything about you already. And we'll then go over an introduction to Forge. We've got some demos prepared that show you the power and the extreme efficiency that we've got ready for you. And that means extending our IDE and bringing tools to new spaces. And then we'll do a QA at the end, but feel free to ask questions throughout the talk. You know, we're right here, so don't be shy.
Yeah.
So your job. Hopefully your job means lots of code. I like writing code. I like being creative and doing new things and trying to solve interesting problems. But I also like to do it efficiently. And I like being productive and not being bogged down by lots of boilerplate, redundancy. I like to keep things, not repeating work over and over again. The problem with creative solutions, though, is that even when you have the ability to do that and you solve a problem, frequently once you've solved it, now you're repeating that over and over again. So once you've solved the problem and you have this pattern, what do we do from there?
Right. So there are some steps on how to automate your job. What can you do to make it faster and more productive? Well, one of your first options is to do with your own hands. Like you copy and paste the code and you have it done.
Yeah, you just sort of like let your eyes fade into dullness and just hit the keyboard over and over again until you're bloody.
You can use sed for whatever you need it. You can write the scripts like bash, batch files.
Right, and scripts, you start getting into the more complicated things where you have logical decisions to make, maybe some looping, and then you get to the point where you have IDE plugins.
Correct.
But
and last but not least, you can delegate to interns.
Mm-hmm.
That's another task.
That's my personal favorite.
So we believe that JBoss Forge fits right there. Just the logo is not, it's missing. But
yeah, Forge is basically filling the space between where you can't do enough with a script, where a bash function or using the Unix file parsing stuff is just going to not be able to handle the complexity, logical decisions, maybe interactivity that you need. But going the full IDE route will bog you down with button layout. How do you design the UI? Most of your time will be spent there as opposed to actually solving the problem. So there's a really interesting space here where you can't quite do enough with a simple script, but you don't want to go the full route of writing an IDE plugin. And there's some other problems with IDEs that we'll cover a little bit later.
All right. So let's create a Java app.
Right. So this is basically the point where we want to show you what this automation looks like using some existing plugins that we've already built for JBoss Forge. These plugins are for Java EE and that ecosystem. But Forge is an extendable tool, so we'll later show you how to write your own extensions and automate your own things. The first thing we want to do is create a new project. This is Forge here running in Eclipse. And to bring this menu up, we just press Control-4, and it shows up. It's contextually sensitive, so depending on what we have selected in our file explorer, we'll get different commands that show up as they're appropriate for whatever we have chosen. So let's just go ahead and create a new project. We're going to make this a store, and we'll make it a Java web application. Click Finish, and here it is. The first thing to notice is that the plugins we're using here in Forge are not making the assumptions. It's just creating a basic Java project for us. There's nothing special. Forge doesn't force you into any paradigm. So when you create a Forge extension, it's not like you have to have a special Forge configuration file where it remembers that it's a Forge project and stores all of its settings. It doesn't do that. We just work with the files and we just understand and comprehend the individual components of the project. So in this store, I want to make it a web application. So I'm going to go ahead and set up Java EE. What do you think, version 7? 6 or 7?
7.
7, okay.
So one of the most boring parts is adding dependencies to your Pwn XML. Like, you never know what's the group ID, what the artifact ID is, what the version is. So Forge allows you to do that without thinking.
Right. But now I pretty much just want to get started. I want to create a domain model. I want to build out the back end of this application. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a new JPA entity. And I'm just going to click through here. It's going to set up JPA for us. That's what all that was. And let's say this is a customer. Click Finish. Here's our customer. Now I can run Forge again. I can add a new field. Oops, that's the wrong one.
Yeah.
New JPA field. And we'll call this name. Now, our customers need to be able to buy something, so we will go in here and make a customer order. And I really don't want to spend a lot of time generating this application. I just want to show you what Forge is capable of, and then we'll take this application and show how we can now solve some of our redundant work.
We'll explore more the Java EE details in our lab tomorrow, a gentle path into Java EE. So you guys are welcome to show.
If you're more interested in all of the generation functionality that we're showing here, we'll go deep into that tomorrow. So here we have customer order. And I want to now create a relationship between customer and customer order. So I go back into JPA new field. We'll say customer order has a customer. And I can
Control space, yeah.
Choose customer. And the relationship here is we're going to have many orders to one customer. We also want to make this an inverse field. So a customer is going to have orders. We click Finish. And our relationship should be here, yeah. So there's our customer. And if we go into the customer, we can see we now have the inverse customer orders field. These add-ons are basically taking some of the manual work of going in, typing all this stuff into the annotation for us. And just to cut to the chase, oops, we have a problem here.
I think you need to clean the project.
Oh, okay. This is just out of date. Okay. Now we have our domain model. Let's go ahead and build the front end for this. Let's say we want to expose some REST endpoints for these objects in the database. We can again pull up Forge, use the extension for generating REST endpoints from entities. XRS2. Forge has noticed that we don't have REST set up, so it's going to ask us to do that. We pick our entities, and we click Finish. So here they are. And this is basically taken a template and applied it to our entities using the settings that we've picked in our wizards. This is a more complicated example of an automated module or automation extension. We can also actually generate a full front end. This is like the ultimate. We can create a JSF application right from this code. And it's going to create all of the views for us to be able to create, read, update, and delete these objects. Can I close this?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so let's deploy this. start. Okay.
Oh.
So here's our store. And the application is all set up for us. We can create customers, save them, etc. This is basic CRUD. We've all seen this before, right? So now what happens when we want to do work on this project? Say we have an existing project and we want to, we have an assignment. Actually, let's get back to the talk here real quick. There's a few things I want to say before this. Okay.
Shift.
Okay. So what we've seen here is JBoss Forge. This is all of the prepackaged functionality that we have to help with Java EE development, Java EE automation. This runs in Eclipse, NetBeans, IntelliJ, and even on the command line. So when you write an extension for this, say you don't use Eclipse or someone on your team doesn't use Eclipse, they can still benefit from you creating the extension to automate that particular functionality or that piece of your job.
Yeah, so why not develop IDE plugins? So first of all, you're bound to a specific provider library. If you ever try to create an Eclipse plugin, you'll see that it's very hard because you have to learn SWT, you have to get in touch with the library and know all the components and the extensions that this framework provides. Same goes for Swing. It's very difficult to reuse among different providers. Well, when you write a plugin for a certain IDE, of course it won't work in another IDE unless you rewrite it.
It's tied to all of the APIs, all of the virtual resource models, and everything that IDE uses in its programming model.
Yeah, and not to mention the different distribution management. Like you have to pack in different zips, or in Eclipse you can create an update site and use the update mechanism that each IDE provides.
Right, and in NetBeans you have to upload it to their website, and IntelliJ you have to upload it to their website, like all these different distribution mechanisms for passing things around.
Yeah, and not to mention that you spend more time on writing that GUI than the functionality itself. Mm-hmm. So that's
right. We think that you shouldn't have to use a specific distribution method. Why not just pass the code around, right? Forge lets you install directly from Git, from a Git repository, directly from GitHub. You can install directly from a Maven artifact. There's just, you can write your own extension for how to install an add-on if you really want to, but we tried to use the technologies that people are actually already using in their jobs, not have to force them to use some special other alternative. That's basically the whole concept behind Forge, is do things how you want to do them, not how someone else tells you how to do them.
Yeah. And
the way this works is Forge is actually an encapsulation. Eclipse, NetBeans, IntelliJ, all of these IDEs use their own programming model. Eclipse uses OSGI. NetBeans uses their own module system. I don't know what IntelliJ uses, but and on the shell, you have to basically write a custom Java app that's going to bootstrap this stuff. So Forge is an embeddable tool. It's its own runtime that provides hot swapping extensions, obviously extensions themselves, and because it's just a Java library, you can embed it into whatever program you want. You can put it into a website and have that website run tools for you on a build server. Anything is possible. It's all just a Java library. So here we have Forge inside these IDEs, inside the shell. And inside Forge we have add-ons. Add-ons are interesting because they're basically modules, like an OSGI module or Project Jigsaw module. But that means that they don't have to, you don't have to worry about what version of a library you use and have that conflict with some other add-on that's in the system. You can do whatever you want within that boundary. And then share the functionality between add-ons. So the UI add-on depends on resources. The Java EE add-on depends on the Java parser and the templates and the UI add-on. And you have this whole like ecosystem of shared functionality.
Yeah, and as you can see with the UI add-on, we created, as Lincoln said, an abstraction layer on the IDE. So Forge also provides implementations, plugin implementations for each of these IDEs that acts like a bridge between your code and the IDE itself.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what we call write once, run anywhere for tools. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So let's go ahead and write an add-on and see how we can take what would be mundane task and turn it into a very, very simple operation that takes no time at all. How many of you in here are familiar with design patterns? Awesome.
Good.
Everyone. How many are familiar with the decorator pattern, where you take an object, you extend it or implement an interface, and then pass in a delegate, and then write some functionality around the calls into that delegate? Now that delegate might have 3 methods, it might have 300, depending on who wrote the code before you. And it is not incredibly fun to sit there and implement 300 methods of the delegate and call super, call this method, return that, super, call this method, return that, and pass all the arguments through. So we're going to show writing an add-on to take that task of creating a delegate and generating it for us based on the class that we've already got in our project that we built earlier.
So, well, let's call like DevNation patterns add-on.
Sure.
Let's give a meaningful
Org JBoss Forge.
JBoss Forge.
Yeah. So just like we created the new Java EE project, we wouldn't be a very good productivity tool if we couldn't actually increase the productivity of actually extending the tool itself. So down here, George is going to pick Forge add-on, which is just a normal Maven project with a few configuration tweaks so that Forge can recognize it and figure out how to bundle it up. And as part of selecting that project type, we now have more options. This is using the UI add-on wizard capability. At the top here, you'll see furnace container. And at the bottom, I'll explain container in just a second. At the bottom, you'll see a list of add-ons that we can choose to depend on in our add-on. So here we have like the UI, the Java parser, JSON parser, XML parser, all of these things that will make processing files easier. We have a templating extension that uses, I think, FreeMarker.
Yeah, it's part of templates.
As one of its implementations.
Yeah.
But instead of doing that, we're just going to pick core, which is going to bring in all of the basics, all of the built-in functionality. So back to the container. As I said before, Forge is an embeddable tool. It is a Java library, and it fits into whatever environment you want. But in addition to fitting into whatever you want, you can also program it and extend it with whatever you want. We have 2 containers out of the box, one that uses CDI, the Java EE standard for dependency injection, and one that uses Java reflection. But we've also played around with a Spring container, JavaScript container using Rhino, a Groovy container. It doesn't matter what you're doing as long as you just expose those interfaces as services to the rest of the Furnace runtime. Furnace is the backbone behind Forge. It's what runs all the add-ons and binds them together. So here's the
add-on.
Add-on here. As you can see, it's just a POM with a few dependencies added. So we want to make a decorator. How do we do that? We need a command.
Okay.
We need something to show up in that list of options, so when we select a class, it can say, hey, make a new decorator for this.
So
and the simplest way to make a new command is just to take a class and throw a few annotations on it.
All right. So let's start by creating
Right. Let's just do a hello
example.
world first so we can get the basics of what's going on here.
String hello world.
Here's our method, and then all you have to do is add @command to it. You don't even need to return anything technically, but in this case, we're just going to say hello.
And display a message.
Yeah, so this is almost the simplest command you can write in Forge. And sticking with the whole paradigm of do no invasive harm, we're just using Java with a few annotations. We're not trying to add lots of crazy APIs.
Yeah, so in order to test it, we could create a test class, a JUnit test class, or we could just run it inside of our IDE. Let's do this. Let's build and install my add-on.
Yeah. So this is an example of Forge running in the command line. This command line happens to also be embedded in Eclipse, but you can actually start Forge from a native operating system terminal and do this exact same thing.
Really, it puts up some problems.
Mm-hmm.
So if I type the command name in autocomplete, it will execute it. Or if I want the nice way of viewing it, using the GUI, you can choose it, and it will show over here. Maybe you have some inputs to for the user to fill.
Let's say hello to someone.
Someone, okay.
Yeah. So it wouldn't be a good command if we couldn't take input. And all you need to do here is add the option annotation and give it a name for the option. And now you have a command that takes input and does something with it.
We can even make it required. So that's it. Split in a new line here.
Right.
Okay.
So now we just need to build and install this again, and we'll have a command that says hello to someone. Under the covers, this is actually doing an entire Maven build that's just producing an artifact and then copying that into the add-ons directory.
So since name is now a required option, what happens if I try to execute hello world without any parameters? So we find out. Nice. It asks for the name. So here's the name.
Yeah.
Here's the result. And in the graphical mode, now I am presented with a wizard.
Mm-hmm. And all of the wizards we've shown you so far out of this interface have been forged. So this is a very simple interface with one field. But as you've seen, we can build complex wizards that have mutually exclusive options that depend on each other's values and really build out something that looks a lot more, and it is more comprehensive and
Like JPA setup.
yeah, we can do that.
Setup.
Yeah, so like this is a wizard to set up JPA. And depending on what we pick here, we'll get different subflows and all of this stuff. So you can go from this simple to really complex without having to write basically any code for layout or stuff like that. We try to make it, we try to default to very sane things. And you can tweak the stuff if you really want to go deep, but we try to make it as easy as possible without getting there.
Yeah. So now let's make it a little bit useful.
You want to go and do the decorator now?
What do you think? All right. So let's do a useful command now.
Yeah, actually, I guess the first thing we could do is we could show that same command using the actual wizard API that Forge provides.
Okay.
We've shown you the annotation-based model. Now we'll show you the Java API model where you actually extend you implement an interface and create a command programmatically.
So this will be like hello world, and I can add the category hello or greetings.
Yeah, so this wizard is going to create us a bare bones command that has all of the essentials needed to run. We could build and run this right now, but it wouldn't do anything.
Yeah, so this basically extends a Forge class that provides some template methods. Basically, what we wanted to do is on the execute method. So if you just want to like display hello world, that should do it. Let me take this. Let's build it. If we execute again, you see that I have the category set and the command name.
Yeah. So this is the same command written with the full API.
If I want to add inputs, I can like ask for the name.
I think you need to inject it, right?
Yeah, and we injected, as we're using CDI, we can inject the inputs that we needed. Then we just add it to the UI. It's a name, sorry.
Yeah. So this is how we can now start to say, based on what we know about what was selected when the user ran the command, add a certain set of inputs. We can configure those inputs with default values, set validators, converters for data types, all of these different things.
Yeah, we can also use another annotation, like if you want to modify the label that is displayed.
This is where you can configure some of the like the descriptions of the fields in the Eclipse wizard, or the pop-up values, or what shows up when the validator fails. Yeah.
Okay. All right. We can even specify the default value, like, I don't know, John.
Are there any questions so far?
Oh, that's good. Okay, so let's do it. Hello world. Now I have a default value. If I try to erase, it's important to notice that each IDE has its own way of displaying warning message. So Forge respects the standard for each IDE, so you don't have to worry about it. You just write your command and it will be rendered as a native wizard.
Right. So why don't we, can we run this in NetBeans or IntelliJ?
That's a good point. I have a NetBeans running here. Let me see if the hello world, there it is. Here it is.
Now, but we didn't install this into NetBeans, did we? So what happened? What's that? That's right. So because both of these IDs are running and both are configured to use our home directory .forge folder to look for add-ons, we installed that add-on from Eclipse. NetBeans saw it, picked it up, and started it up dynamically.
Yeah, and IntelliJ is the same. So, right.
Yeah. Likewise, we could also delete this add-on from one of the IDEs, and it would disappear from everywhere.
From everywhere. That's right.
There is also a permanent add-ons folder. So if you go into the installation of the IDE or the installation of Forge, you can put the add-on there, and it will be permanent for that installation. But the home directory is kind of like the common playground.
All right. Let's start by creating a new project here. Yeah, okay.
Oh yeah, IntelliJ doesn't let you start without a project, right?
Yeah. So Control-Alt-4.
Actually, do you have Forge on the command line as well?
Sure. Yes, we do have Forge in the command line. Let me open. Let's say I don't like these fancy IDEs. I like to use Vim or Emacs, or I'm a hardcore programmer.
Nano. If you really hate yourself.
Yeah, exactly. So it's possible that you might want to use the shell version of Forge. Just a minute. Just thinking.
You need a new computer, George.
I know.
Okay. So Forge is going to start up here. And this is where it's going out. It checks to see where all the add-ons are. It starts booting them up. Most of what we have installed here uses CDI, so it's actually starting like 20 or 30 different CDI containers all while it starts up here. And it looks like it's ready for us.
And I can see my hello world command in here.
And hello, John, right from the command line.
Yeah.
Cool. So why don't we go back and now show how we can use Forge to take a file from an existing project and now create this decorator that we've promised all of you.
Yeah. All right. So, well, let's start by creating
A new command.
a new command. Yeah. We can create the command using the CLI. Add-on, new UI command. Name it create
decorator.
Decorator command.
Yeah.
And there you go.
Cool. So I guess the first thing we want to do with this command is we want to see what class are we generating the decorator for. How are we going to do that? If we go down to the execute method, we can get a handle of the context. And this is sort of like, it's a context, right? It has information in it. You get information out. You can set configurations. But we get the UI context out of this. And we get the user's initial selection. This is important because the initial selection says, what were you looking at when you ran me? You can also get the current selection, but the current selection might actually change if the user has changed their selection while the command is running. So this is an important distinction to make. And we know that we want to get a Java resource. So we ask for the initial selection, we get the first element out of it, and then we just convert it to a Java resource.
So now,
But there's a problem, right? So what happens if the user is not selecting a Java resource? What do you think is going to happen at this point? What was that? The guess was, is it going to create one? The answer is no. Any other guesses? Prompt? No.
Nope.
Null point. ClasscastException.
ClasscastException.
Exactly. This is not a great situation. I'm glad we were able to impress you to the point where you thought we would handle this automatically, but no, this is Java code. So, what we want to do is make sure that the user can only run this command on a Java resource. And the way we do that is we extend the isEnabled method. We get the initial selection again, and we just check, say, hey, are you a Java resource? And we return that. Now this command will only ever appear and be runnable on a Java class, a Java source file.
Okay. So now for the hard part of creating the decorator itself, we have a library.
Mm-hmm.
Here it is.
And this library was written using a Forge subproject called Roaster, which is our Java parser.
Yes.
You know, roaster, beans, Java beans, coffee roasting.
Yeah, exactly. So let's start by installing this dependency. So project add dependencies, org, what's the group ID again? We don't have a command to do that automatically.
Org JBoss Forge, design patterns,
Design patterns,
colon.
111 snapshot. So yeah, started one dependency. Let's check the pon.xml. There it is, and it's managed.
Yep.
Okay.
So we'll show you what the code is in the actual the library that we wrote that's going to generate the decorator. But for now, I just want to focus on making this command run and how we modify the project. So now that we have the Java resource that the user has selected, we can pass it into our design patterns library, and that is going to produce another Java source, but it's only going to be in memory. It's just an in-memory representation of this Java file. Once we have that, we can now save it back into the project. In order to do that, we need to get a handle of the project, and then we'll ask the project, hey, where do you put your source files? Stick this there. So how do we get the project?
Oh, we need a project factor, of course. Project factory.
Yeah. And because, again, we're using CDI here, all we have to do is say, hey, inject the project factory.
Inject it.
And now we have one.
Yes.
Once we have the project factory, we now have access to all kinds of stuff. We can say, hey, give me the current project for this context, and also get me the different facets of this project. As I said earlier, Forge tries to not add configuration files or like keep its own state. It just uses the project files to comprehend what's going on under the covers. So when you load up a project, Forge is going to say, it's going to look through all the files. It's going to say, hey, 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 what do you guys do? And then it loads up facets for each of those different capabilities and gives us access to them here in the Forge API. So we're going to ask the project that we've gotten out of the project factory to give it its Java source facet. And we know it's a Java project because we've already gotten a Java resource for the initial selection. So that's not a danger here. And once we get the Java source facet, we have a whole set of options that provides us. If we go into the Java source facet for just a second, just go into that interface. Okay, there.
Okay.
We can see it's giving us functions for like figuring out the package of classes, finding Java resources. We can actually, I think, visit all of the Java sources and parse them one at a time and look for specific pieces of code in the whole project itself. And then it also gives us the ability to save a Java source representation back into the project. And that's what George is doing in the command.
That's right. So
if we go here, we ask the facet to save the resource that we just created called Decorator. And at this point, we should have a decorator.
that's right. And
There's one more step. Once we have that decorator, we want it to open up in the IDE so that we can provide that nice experience like, boom, here it is. And I think this is runnable now, right?
Yeah. Let's install it. Let's see what we got. Add-on.
I don't know if any of you have given a talk while someone's taking your photo. It's extremely distracting. You're good. Okay, so.
Okay. So let's take any class, for example. Let's get back to our store. How about we get the customer bean?
Sure. We'll go with this EJB here. We want to create a decorator for this EJB.
And there it is. Oh, we forgot to add the category. Here it is.
Awesome. We got a decorator. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
Would you use that? So how is this generated? Like, what do we do? What kind of magic sauce did we whip up to take this bean and create this decorator out of it? This is where Roaster comes into play. Roaster, as I said, is our Java parser. And how many have actually worked with a Java parser before in the past? You guys? Anyone else? What do you think? How is it? Annoying? Yeah. So we agree. It's extremely annoying to use a Java parser because you have to basically understand how abstract syntax trees work. There's a lot of node visiting, like figuring out what types things are, figuring out what properties go on certain types, and nothing is really typed very well. So what we did is we created this library that wraps the Eclipse Java parser, which is actually a very powerful Java parser, and it provides a human-readable API for how to manipulate Java files. So here, we try to create a fluent builder style API. So we can just say, create a new Java class source file, set its package, set its name, add a field, set the properties of that field. We can actually go down and add methods. We can set the body directly with a string as opposed to having to add each individual statement. That's actually one place where we fall short is if you wanted to create. No, actually we have statement creation now.
Yeah, we do have, but not in the master branch yet.
Yeah. Creating statements is like super annoying because you need to know the this keyword, like where the type that represents that is. And now once you do that, you have to create a new declaration for the variable ID, and then you have to make a new assignment and then pass in the value of that assignment and then like terminate the line, and it just gets really messy really fast. So we pretty much hid that all into this thing where you can just pass in a string and you're good. And so all of that produces this class.
This class.
This code here. And this is actually kind of impressive, I think. Usually when you write code, you don't want to have to write more code than what you would have written anyway. And we've actually managed to do that here. So I like that. It's at least not, if not shorter, it's not longer, which is good.
Yeah, besides also supports Java doc creation and also formatting the source code.
Mm-hmm. So how do we make our decorator?
You mean a decorator or a builder?
How did we create the decorator?
How did we create the decorator? Okay,
in the
let's
library
check
itself.
the library code.
So here's our design pattern that creates the decorator. You want to talk us through what you did?
Sure. First of all, I used a roster to create a new Java class source, just like the example we just mentioned. Actually, this one is, well, okay. I just navigate through all the imports and add it to the decorator class. Here I'm using a Lambda expression to
Java 8.
Java 8. Then I create a new constructor that will take the same type as pass it to my decorator as the delegate. I set the body as a delegate and also field made private final. Name it delegate, just like this. So, just like this.
So that creates the constructor for this object.
Yeah, and then it's just a matter of iterating through each method, taking the ones that are not private.
Yeah, so we basically say, hey, is this Java source something that holds methods? For each of those methods, if it's not private, then build a new method that creates the appropriate delegate call for the superclass and return the appropriate value where you have a return statement.
Yeah.
And it's not like the simplest thing, but it's actually not a really incredibly simple problem when you get down to it. But it just shows that you can do that kind of stuff in not too much work. I mean, this is like, how many lines is this method? Like 50 lines of code?
50, yeah. A little bit more, but yeah. And
we did the same thing for making a builder.
For making a builder.
So like when you want to take an object and create a new instance of it, and you say, instead of having to assign that object to a variable, and then say variable.setName.set address, .set age, all of those things, you can say new builder.setName.setAge.set. Just simplifies the creation. That's what.
We can do the same right now. I can just create the builder, except that this must be a Java class source.
Yeah, and so the difference between the API that we're showing you here and the annotation-driven command API that we showed earlier is that these two classes actually duplicate quite a bit of code. So we could actually create a superclass for these commands and break this down into just a very simple 3-class hierarchy that would make it easier to just continue implementing design patterns as we go along. Because obviously Builder and Decorator are not the only design patterns that we have.
So let's take, for example, this customer, and suppose we want to create a builder out of it. Create builder. Oops, let me get back to Eclipse. Here it is. Here's the code produced, where you can do like a create and then call with every property, and then call build. You have it.
Yep.
Fulfilled.
So that's 2 examples of what you can do when you have something in between the bash script and the IDE. We wrote 0 layout code here. We didn't interact with the IDE at all. You just get your hands on the functionality, and I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, I pushed my code if you're interested on seeing how this works in the Gastaldi design patterns. Yeah,
And I think as a result of doing this session and demo, we're going to start creating a design patterns
side project
add-on for Forge. And that is going to live
in our website.
on our website. Oops,
It's
there
the
it is.
first tab.
This is the Forge website, and here,
Forge.jboss.org.
Yep, forge.jboss.org, that number again. So if you can go over here, it'll show you, basically an overview of what Forge is, how to get it, and the different platforms that have native plugins, essentially. So if you don't want to run it in the command line or in a specific tool, this will get you what you need. So if we go over here to add-ons, we can see all of the add-ons in the Forge ecosystem. These are the community contributed add-ons and the core add-ons that we use as building blocks. All of these are essentially small pieces of functionality. So the UI API is here. We have Gradle support. We have converters. If you need to store configuration for settings for your add-on, we have functionality for that. Dependencies helps you go out to Maven repositories or Ivy repositories and pull down libraries and consume those in your add-on. We have a Git add-on that lets you interact with Git directly from within your code. And then here's the Java parser and the other things.
Yeah, there are parsers as well.
Yep. So when you want to learn more about one of these libraries, for example, how to create commands and extensions, you can go into the add-on here, and each one has pretty comprehensive documentation for how to use it, the APIs that are available. All of the core add-ons come with Forge. That's right. And if you want to install an add-on, you can go up here to Wildfly Swarm, for instance, and click installation. And this is the command that will install it. There's also, if you push the Control-4 in Eclipse or IntelliJ or NetBeans, it'll say install an add-on, and it'll guide you through that. And you just put these coordinates in there. There's actually also a documentation section. So if you want to learn how to create an add-on, for instance, we have tutorials for that. And it'll guide you through that. Some of these tutorials do a side-by-side of like, hey, this is how you do it if you just want to hack the Maven stuff yourself. And then we also show you how to do it using the Forge commands themselves. And all of the documentation is actually categorized by like beginner or advanced. So you can start with some of the simpler things, and then as you progress, you can say, like an advanced topic is testing add-ons. We know code is great, but no code is great without tests. So this shows you how to test your add-on and do a lot of really cool stuff. And lastly,
But not least,
definitely not least, the community page will basically point you in the right direction for whatever you want to do. If you want to build an add-on, if you found a bug, it'll tell you how to submit it to us. We have links to the forums, email lists, and IRC. We're always on IRC. And we want you to come join us and be a part of this.
These are real data. Like if you contribute to Forge, it will read from the GitHub API and display it here.
Yeah. So at this point, I think we will move on to the QA.